McDonald's is shutting down its Cosmix locations.
Chicago-based McDonald's is shutting down its
and Aussie beef.
Most of it goes into McDonald's hamburgers, and if you push up the price by 25%.
McDonald's just dropped a literal bomb on President Trump, and it's worth billions this time. In a move no one saw coming, they shut down all 13,417 of their U.S. stores overnight. No warning, no backup plan, just a sudden blackout across the country. And the reason? Yes, you guessed it, Trump's new tariffs, which made it so expensive to operate that even stocking up on ketchup became a problem. But these tariffs didn't just push up prices, they broke the entire system. Now the big question is, what happens to the $4.7 billion in annual revenue that's vanished into thin air? Is this really what America First was supposed to look like? Or is Trump playing a much bigger game behind the scenes? Because at 4 a.m. sharp, McDonald's dropped a corporate nuke that sent shockwaves through the American economy. Every single one of its US locations was shutting down, effective immediately. Just a cold corporate statement detonated in the dead of night, leaving nearly 1 million Americans blindsided. The announcement wiped out $35 billion in annual domestic revenue in one breath and left 780,000 employees jobless before sunrise. CEO Chris Kempczynski tried to soften the blow by calling it strategic restructuring, but internal documents leaked within hours painted a far more desperate reality. This wasn't a plan, it was a corporate death spasm. This was the blast radius, but what happened next proved the detonation wasn't the worst part. It was the beginning of collapse. Within hours, America's golden arches went dark. Viral footage from Florida to Illinois captured store managers breaking down in tears as they taped "closed until further notice" signs onto the same doors they'd unlocked for decades. Unmarked trucks rolled in like corporate cleanup crews, stripping logos, emptying kitchens, and loading cash registers into the back of vans. Customers arrived to silence. Drive-thrus were dead. Overnight, McDonald's didn't just close, it vanished. And Wall Street knew it. McDonald's stock collapsed by 39.2% in a matter of hours, erasing $90 billion in market value and setting off a fast food sector panic not seen since the 2020 lockdowns. The emotional collapse of neighborhoods was bad enough, but the financial devastation triggered a tidal wave of institutional fear. But none of this chaos came out of nowhere. The pressure had been building like a cracked dam since early 2025. The trigger, a ruthless piece of economic artillery called the 2025 Tariff Expansion Act, signed and championed by Donald Trump. In the name of American strength, the act slapped a brutal 35% tariff on Canadian beef, crippling for McDonald's, which sourced nearly a third of its meat through Canada. But the pain didn't stop there. Another 18% tariff hit potatoes rerouted through Canadian distributors. And if that wasn't enough, a 22% tariff was levied on commercial fryers and refrigeration systems imported from Germany, blocking essential kitchen infrastructure. Every piece of McDonald's core inventory chain was cracked wide open, but the financial bleeding hadn't even fully started yet. Internal financials from Q2 2025 were horrifying. The cost of goods per meal had jumped a staggering 48%. That made the beloved dollar menu a dead fantasy, and even a basic cheeseburger cost over $2.60 just to produce, before labor, packaging, or delivery. The chain's most iconic offerings became mathematically impossible to sell at profit, and behind the scenes, the machines began to fail too. Those McFlurry machines people joked about online weren't just broken, they were unfixable. Replacement parts stuck in German ports couldn't pass inspection. Customs delays turned meme content into operational failure. Corporate had already cut large fry sizes, reduced dipping sauces, and axed entire menu items to stem the bleeding. But the profit margins? Already dead. The real crisis wasn't just at the cash register, it was buried inside the bones of the supply chain that no longer functioned. The dam burst in the form of a leaked executive call. The tape confirmed what insiders already feared. McDonald's was losing $93 million every single week just to stay open in the United States. That's not a cash flow hiccup, that's full-blown hemorrhage. And the culprits were merciless. Oil prices had spiked to $121 per barrel, sending freight costs skyrocketing. Cold storage facilities in Houston and Chicago canceled contracts mid-month after McDonald's couldn't keep up with invoicing. Suppliers froze shipments. Ports backed up. Entire distribution routes collapsed in real time. Frozen patties were thawing in transport. Produce was rotting in and warehouses. The logistics engine that once powered the Golden Arches had seized up like a rusted machine. It wasn't just that McDonald's was expensive to run, it had become logistically impossible to keep alive another quarter. Franchisees on the ground had already sounded the alarm. In major states like Texas, California, and Ohio, operators reported 3-day supply windows and no deliveries on the horizon. Some stores couldn't even get basic buns. In certain regions, the cost of transporting a shipment of hamburger buns exceeded the wholesale value of the buns themselves. Refrigerated trucks were charging double just to maintain temperature compliance, turning routine orders into financial suicide. Stores began cannibalizing inventory, rationing oil, and in some cases closing multiple hours early just to preserve enough ingredients for the next morning. This wasn't a temporary squeeze, it was corporate starvation. The collapse wasn't from a single bullet. It was a slow, crushing chokehold by economic policy turned weapon. What McDonald's faced wasn't a market failure. It wasn't changing consumer habits. It wasn't a boycott. It was sabotage by policy. The tariffs turned every product into a liability, every shipment into a gamble. There was no path forward because the math refused to work. The cost to sell a burger exceeded the price customers were willing to pay, and worse. Inventory couldn't even arrive on time to sell it. This wasn't a broken company. It was a business model murdered in broad daylight by political ego masquerading as economic strategy. But if you think this collapse ends with corporate losses and empty fryers, you haven't seen what franchisees were forced to do next. The illusion of McDonald's being an all-American empire collapsed the moment internal sourcing documents leaked to the press. What they exposed was devastating. 68% of McDonald's core ingredients, packaging, hardware, and equipment were foreign sourced, not assembled abroad, not supplemented, entirely dependent. The beef may have been grilled in Kansas, but the bones of the operation came from overseas. What looked like Main Street USA was built on a fragile global skeleton that couldn't survive under tariff siege. The American-made fast food fantasy had been just that, a fantasy. You think that's bad? Wait until you hear where even the ketchup and fryers really came from. German-engineered fryers, sauce packets made in Southeast Asia, ketchup concentrate from India, packaging from South America. These weren't just convenient outsourcing choices, they were the foundation. Even the automation software powering the self-order kiosks came from Taiwan, tethering customer transactions to geopolitical instability. With each layer of Trump's 2025 tariffs, that fragile network cracked, machines failed, delivery systems froze, and suddenly the self-serve promise of modern McDonald's turned into an unusable, error-prone wreck held together by duct tape and desperate resets. And once that system started breaking, it didn't stall. Slowly, it crumbled like a structure with its beams yanked out. By the time the tariffs truly sank in, McDonald's US infrastructure wasn't just stressed, it was functionally obliterated. Every operational touchpoint relied on imports that were now too expensive or too delayed to be viable. Spare parts were gone, sauce shipments were rerouted or stuck. The overseas backbone had splintered under the weight of Trump's economic grenades. Behind the red, white, and yellow branding, the truth was unavoidable. America's most iconic brand couldn't survive on American soil. It had become a hostage of its own global supply web. But what franchise owners were forced to do next makes this collapse look almost dignified by comparison. With corporate silent and supply chains frozen, franchisees in Ohio, Texas, and Florida were pushed into chaos. Desperate to stay open even one more day, they turned to Amazon, not for convenience, but for survival. They were ordering burger patties and sesame buns at retail prices, paying up to $17 for items that typically cost under $4 wholesale. And they weren't using company cards or bulk suppliers. They were using personal credit cards, Prime accounts, PayPal, whatever they could scrape together to keep the kitchen from dying overnight. That was humiliating. And soon the whole country saw just how bad it got. A leaked internal memo from McDonald's Midwest regional office confirmed what many had already suspected. Emergency instructions were issued weeks before the public announcement. Franchisees were told to ration sauces, remove large fry sizes, and brace for full menu shrinkage. Managers received corporate orders to preserve customer experience using discretion. That's a sanitized way of saying lie about the shortages. And when stores began swapping fries for apple slices, the internet didn't stay quiet. A TikTok video showing one such receipt hit 10 million views by midnight, turning corporate shame into viral disaster. The optics were brutal, but the consequences for the entire fast food industry were about to be worse. The McDonald's implosion triggered a chain reaction that blindsided analysts and sent investor confidence into freefall. Wendy's stock dropped 14%. Burger King fell 17%. Even Starbucks, with minimal exposure to QSR food logistics, took a 9% hit. In a single day, the Nasdaq Food Index crashed 11.3%, its sharpest collapse since March 2020. CNBC scrapped its regular programming to go wall to wall on the unfolding crisis, dubbing it the McCrash. Bloomberg's ticker ran one word all day: free fall. The meltdown wasn't isolated. It was an industry-wide tremor with a $300 billion price tag looming over the market. If Wall Street was panicking, the tech platforms tethered to fast food were collapsing even faster. Uber Eats and DoorDash were hit hard. Order volume fell by 32% as restaurants began vanishing from the app interfaces. Delivery partners were left stranded, orders canceled, ghost kitchens gone offline, and menus flagged as temporarily unavailable. Earnings for drivers tanked by over 40% in just days. Reddit and TikTok lit up with screenshots of darkened McDonald's storefronts, error messages, and delivery failures. The apps that once bridged the gap between restaurants and customers were never built to withstand a total wipeout of their largest partners. And now, what started as corporate death has turned into real-world job loss spreading like wildfire. Over 950,000 jobs are now at risk across the US fast food ecosystem. And these aren't just McDonald's workers, these are downstream employees. Small franchise chains, beverage vendors, condiment packagers, delivery couriers, marketing teams, all of them are watching contracts dry up and foot traffic disappear. In urban hubs like Atlanta and Chicago, some chains are reporting footfall drops as high as 60% just days after McDonald's vanished from nearby locations. Hiring freezes are already in place. Local restaurants that depended on spillover traffic from McDonald's are being forced to cut hours or close outright. But if you think McDonald's leadership was scrambling to fix it, think again. They were plotting their escape. More than 3,000 franchisees have now filed a class action lawsuit against McDonald's, accusing the corporation of deliberately leaving them to burn. The lawsuit claims there was no warning, no renegotiation of terms, and no attempt to restructure, just silence. Franchisees say they paid hundreds of thousands in corporate fees and were left abandoned. Many were still paying off loans tied to their stores when the plug was pulled. They didn't lose a brand, they lost homes, careers, and everything they had invested for decades. And while these owners were drowning, corporate was already trying to cash out quietly and leave the country behind. Leaked internal emails confirmed what nobody wanted to believe. McDonald's global HQ was actively shopping its US assets to Middle Eastern investors as early as the first quarter of 2025. Documents titled International Redeployment Plan showed proposed divestment strategies and sales presentations for foreign buyers, none of which were disclosed to franchisees. These weren't exploratory talks. These were escape plans. And the people who had built the golden arches on American soil weren't even given a heads up that the brand was being gutted from beneath them. And the reason for the silence? Because leadership was too obsessed with buzzwords to bother saving the system they built. A corporate audit revealed $1.2 billion had been flushed into automation programs that failed catastrophically. AI-powered fry stations burned through batches of product during calibration. Kiosks double-charged customers. Receipt systems went dark during peak hours. The tech didn't enhance the operation, it short-circuited it. And while stores crumbled, executives focused on optics. Former leaders are now speaking out, saying ESG milestones and climate goals were given higher priority than basic equipment repair or labor turnover rates. They didn't run a business, they ran a brand campaign, and it cost everyone else everything. Because when leadership chases headlines instead of customers, all it takes is one policy shock to turn a kingdom into rubble. Chick-fil-A, Five Guys, and In-N-Out wasted no time filling the vacuum. As McDonald's crumbled, these chains launched aggressive nationwide hiring blitzes, targeting the very workers left stranded by the golden arches. Within days, job portals were flooded with offers for displaced employees, some even offering bonuses for prior McDonald's experience. Chick-fil-A pledged over 40,000 new hires for Q3 alone. Five Guys dropped a virtual tour of its new East Coast production hub with embedded job ads. In-N-Out fast-tracked its Texas expansion 3 years ahead of schedule. These weren't sympathy hires, they were strategic takeovers. What began as a collapse is now being carved up by hungrier, smarter players with a war-ready appetite for disruption. Meanwhile, two fresh faces, Clean Bite and Real Meat USA, emerged from the chaos with a message investors couldn't ignore. No foreign parts, no offshore dependency, and zero tolerance for tariff exposure. In just 3 weeks, Clean Bite secured contracts for 50 new locations. Real Meat USA raked in over $40 million in seed capital, locking in beef supply deals directly with Midwestern ranchers. They're not nostalgia brands. They're engineered for the world McDonald's couldn't survive in. A domestic-first, logistics-proof, politically neutral food economy built from scratch. When legacy crumbles, insurgents don't hesitate. They scale fast, they market louder, and they build systems that don't need saving. And in true internet fashion, what couldn't be bought anymore was recreated. DIY garage burger pop-ups started appearing across TikTok using grocery store ingredients to build bootleg Big Macs. Secret sauce tutorials hit over 20 million views. Some creators even 3D printed wrappers to complete the illusion. What once came with a Happy Meal is now coming out of people's kitchens. It's not rebellion, it's replacement. McDonald's didn't just go dark, it got digitally reverse engineered, because in the end, this wasn't just a business collapse. It was proof that the empire was hollow all along.